In the misty morning streets of Greenwich, I began tending to my garden as I do every day. The early summer breeze, carrying the sweet scent of roses, gently caressed the garden of our bed and breakfast, a labor of love that Tom, my husband, and I started 35 years ago. Our colonial-style building, constructed in the 1920s, has become a beloved landmark in town. The polished banister, the living room with its fireplace, and 6 guest rooms furnished with antiques, every corner speaks to me of memories shared with my husband. "Martha, those pancakes were fantastic this morning," Mr. Johnson, one of our regulars, called out before heading to work. Our breakfast, filled with the aroma of blueberries and maple syrup, has always been our pride and joy. Though it's been 3 years since my husband passed, his cherished recipes and warm hospitality live on unchanged. "Thank you so much. I'll have apple pie ready for you tomorrow," I replied with a smile while working the soil. In a corner of the garden, daisies, April's favorites, were beginning to bloom. She'd be thrilled when she sees them. My eyes welled up at the thought. I let out a deep sigh as I adjusted my silver hair. April is my granddaughter, Linda's daughter, who's turning 8 this year. How her presence heals my heart when she comes running to me, her bright brown hair tied with ribbons, big blue eyes sparkling as she calls out, "Grandma." 2 years ago, Linda married Brian Watson, the executive director of Watson Real Estate, a major local firm. Brian seemed like a capable young man, looking sharp in his suits with a meticulous air about him. At first, I had no concerns whatsoever. But after the marriage, changes began to appear gradually. What particularly worried me was the presence of George and Eleanor Watson, Brian's parents. Living in an imposing Georgian mansion in the Belhaven district, the couple was known publicly as philanthropists active in charitable work. Yet I wondered what really happened behind those red brick walls surrounding their 2-acre property. When I heard Linda's voice over the phone, it seemed hollow and hesitant. "Mom, we're doing fine," she would say evasively, and I felt anxious many times hearing her voice. I learned that my daughter, once a beloved elementary school teacher, was now on leave, supposedly to fit into the Watson family's way of life. "Grandma, I can't talk anymore," April had said 2 weeks ago when she stopped by after school. Usually full of energy running around the garden, that day she was unusually quiet. She wore the smartwatch I'd given her for her 8th birthday, the one with tracking features, while wearing an expression that suggested she had something to say. Since then, even my phone calls with Linda had gotten shorter. The influence of Brian's parents, George and Eleanor, was undeniable. Though known in town as philanthropists and social butterflies, I hadn't missed the coldness lurking in their eyes. They seemed to demand perfection and appeared to disapprove of April's free-spirited nature. As twilight approached, I was lost in thought while preparing dinner in the kitchen. In my 35 years of running this B&B, I developed an eye for reading people while sharing in our guests' life moments. And now, that intuition was sending out warning signals. Something was eating away at my precious granddaughter's heart. If Tom were still alive, he would surely have felt the same way. The phone rang just as these worrying thoughts crossed my mind. The clock showed 6:15 p.m. Outside the window, the early summer twilight of New England had begun casting ominous shadows. The phone kept ringing. April's familiar number. But when I picked up, there was only silence on the other end. April. Faint breathing. Then, the sound of quiet sobbing. A chill ran down my spine. Grandma. The voice I barely heard was thin and trembling, completely unlike April's usually bright and energetic tone. That single word sent a sensation like my blood running backward through my entire body. April. What's wrong? Where are you? No response. Instead, I heard what sounded like a heavy door closing in the distance. Then, complete silence. Frantically checking the screen, I saw the GPS location from April's smartwatch, the birthday present I'd given her. It showed the Watson mansion, but slightly away from the main building. Stay right there. I'm coming right now. My words vanished into the void, but my determination was firm. I grabbed my car keys from the entrance and rushed out into the dimming evening. The twilight townscape began to blur my vision. Stay calm, I told myself while gripping the steering wheel. I couldn't afford to lose my composure. I arrived at the Watson mansion just after 7 p.m. It was already getting dark, and the Georgian-style building with its white decorative columns cast eerie shadows. Beyond the meticulously maintained gardens, I could see the pool, and behind it, an old and used water tank. I pressed the intercom, but there was no response. The front lights weren't on either. Strange. Someone should be home at this hour. April. Raising my voice, I made my way through the vast property. The 2-acre grounds felt impossibly large in the twilight. Wind rustled through the bushes, making the rose branches sway. Then, here. A faint voice. Coming from the direction of the old water tank. I quickened my pace. As I approached the rusty cylindrical structure, the voice became clearer. Cold. It was April's voice. No doubt about it. When I knocked on the tank's outer wall, there was a response from inside. April. Hold on. Grandma's here to help you. The tank's lid was heavy and difficult to open. But with the singular focus of rescuing my granddaughter, my arms found strength beyond their usual capacity. As the lid opened, cold air leaked out. The tank was half filled with water, and April was huddled on a narrow ledge at the edge. She was completely soaked and shivering, her face pale. Grandma. I immediately reached out and pulled April up. Her small body was ice cold, her teeth chattering. I took off my cardigan and wrapped it around her. You're safe now. Grandma's here to protect you. While holding April close, I was already thinking about the next steps. First the ambulance, then the police. I took out my smartphone and dialed emergency services with trembling fingers. Greenwich Police Department. We're at the Watson Mansion in the Belhaven district. An 8-year-old girl in a water tank. While explaining the situation to the operator, I was rubbing April's body to warm her up. The smartwatch on her wrist was glowing, my birthday present with GPS and automatic recording features. Now, that choice seemed fateful. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Red and blue lights flashed alternately as they drew closer in the deepening twilight. April clung to me, still trembling slightly. Who? Why? Questions kept arising. But for now, protecting this child's life took priority. As the ambulance's headlights approached, I was firmly resolved. I would uncover the truth behind this incident and make those who hurt my granddaughter pay their due. Tom would have made the same choice. As paramedics rushed toward us, I gently stroked April's hair while making a silent vow. The hallway at Greenwich General Hospital was unusually busy despite the late hour. A doctor emerged from the emergency treatment room and quickly approached me. "Mrs. Green, your granddaughter's condition is stable." The veteran doctor with graying hair paused for a moment. I felt an indescribable anxiety in his expression. "We've successfully treated her hypothermia. However, we've found several bruises on her body. Some appear to be from several days ago." Those words struck my heart like a physical blow. Signs of violence on April's body. And it hadn't started today. "We suspect abuse. We've contacted the police, but may I speak with you?" The examination room consultation lasted 2 hours. As I answered the doctor's careful questions, all the previous signs of trouble began connecting one by one. The changes in April's behavior, the decreased phone calls with Linda, and the unnatural attitude of her in-laws. "I'm sorry, but we can't reach her parents." A nurse entered the room. But neither Linda nor Brian was answering their phones. As anxiety mounted, word came in from the police. They're currently attending a real estate investment seminar in Las Vegas. A seminar? I never heard about such plans. My voice trembled. The police officer continued. "According to the organizer, there are restrictions, and attendees must surrender their mobile phones." At that moment, a scream came from April's hospital room. When I rushed in, she was having a nightmare. "Stop." As the nurse hurried over, I gripped April's hand. That's when I noticed she was still wearing that smartwatch. "Detective, this smartwatch has a recording function." My words made the detective's eyes light up. A police technician was called, and data extraction began. The voices that played out made us all shudder. "I'll teach you about discipline. I won't allow behavior that sullies this house's dignity. Grandpa, it hurts. Shut up. Your parents are nothing but pawns who follow our orders. Eleanor, put this one in the tank. Until she learns her lesson." George and Eleanor's voices, and April's anguished cries. Combined with the location data, it became irrefutable evidence. This is systematic child abuse. The detective's voice was low and heavy. Greenwich, one of America's wealthiest areas. The horrifying true nature of its social scene stars was about to be revealed. A fake seminar designed to keep the parents away. It should have been a perfect plan, but the detective continued while reviewing documents. This smartwatch exposed everything. I nodded silently. The B&B that Tom and I started 35 years ago, promising to make it a place of happy memories. The ability to read people that experience had taught me finally proved meaningful. Late that night, we finally reached Linda and Brian. Informed of the situation by police, they said they would return immediately. Brian's voice, in particular, shook with intense anger. For father and mother to do such things, unforgivable. I could hear Linda crying on the other end. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have noticed." "Linda, this isn't your fault," I said firmly. "What matters is what we do from here." In the hospital room, April had finally fallen asleep, breathing softly. I gently stroked her hair as we waited for morning. Outside the window, the pre-dawn sky was gradually brightening. And at the police station, preparations for executing arrest warrants were steadily progressing. "I'll make sure they pay," I vowed internally. In-laws who abused my young granddaughter while maintaining social credibility through their public charitable activities. It was time for them to pay their dues. While holding April's hand, I was already planning our next steps. As the sun began to rise, the hospital room door opened. The detective quietly entered and gave me a knowing look. "Everything's ready. We have the arrest warrants." I nodded silently at those words. In the interrogation room at Greenwich Police Station, George Watson's angry shouts echoed through the thick walls into the hallway. "How dare you arrest us? Do you know how much charitable work we've done in this town?" His voice was cut off by police officers. I sat on a bench in the hallway, reflecting on the events since last night. Police officers with arrest warrants surrounded the Watson mansion just after dawn. Eleanor's scream when she answered the door. Then George's resistance. "Impossible. There can't be any evidence." Those words froze when confronted with the smartwatch recording data. GPS location, voice recordings, and the doctor's report. A series of undeniable evidence cornered the Watsons. "Mom." I heard Linda's voice and turned to see my daughter running down the hallway, with an exhausted-looking Brian behind her. They had spent all night changing flights to get back. "April. Is she okay?" Linda's eyes were wet with tears. "She's safe now. Resting in the hospital. A nurse is staying with her." Linda let out a deep sigh of relief at my words. Meanwhile, Brian's expression remained hard. "I will never forgive my parents." His voice carried an intensity I'd never heard before. Last night, the truth about the seminar had come to light. The Las Vegas real estate investment seminar was completely fabricated. Their names weren't on the participant list, and no reservation records existed. It was all part of the Watsons' carefully crafted plan. A trap to keep the parents away while they disciplined April as they saw fit. Mr. Brian Watson, a detective, called out. "Your father's interrogation is beginning. Could we have your testimony?" Brian hesitated for a moment but then nodded with strong determination. I'll tell you everything. About my parents' true nature. His testimony in the interrogation room lasted 4 hours. Brian calmly described his parents' controlling nature from his childhood, their forced values, and the reality of repeated psychological abuse. Always demanding perfection, if anything didn't meet their expectations. His testimony was recorded as evidence. Meanwhile, Eleanor's interrogation proceeded in another room. Around noon, we received a call from the hospital. April had woken up and was able to talk. Linda immediately tried to head to the hospital, but the police had a suggestion. Would you allow us to video record your daughter's testimony? We'd like to proceed with the trial in a way that minimizes burden on her. We agreed. During the video recording in the hospital room, April slowly began to talk about that day while firmly holding my hand. Grandpa pulled my hair. Linda lowered her eyes several times during the testimony. Brian stared at the wall, his fists clenched. By evening, the initial legal procedures were finally complete. The Watsons were indicted and detained pending trial. Simultaneously, a protection order was issued for April. This will be a difficult battle ahead, the assigned lawyer explained to us. However, we have sufficient evidence. The smartwatch data, medical report, and testimonies. With this much evidence. We nodded quietly at those words. The trial dragged on longer than expected. The Watsons' defense team, backed by their enormous wealth, employed various legal tactics. However, their resistance gradually crumbled in the face of irrefutable evidence. The decisive moment came when the smartwatch recordings were played in court. You disgrace to this family. You'll never go to your grandmother's place again. We can't let someone who behaves so crudely inherit the Watson name. As the verbal abuse echoed through the courtroom, the jurors' expressions grew increasingly severe. Then came the day of the verdict. The courtroom was filled with tension. Defendants George Watson and Eleanor Watson. After careful consideration of the evidence of this court, the judge's voice quietly resonated through the courtroom. Pronounces the following verdict on both defendants. George Watson, 7 years imprisonment. Eleanor Watson, 5 years imprisonment. The solemn reading of the verdict. In the gallery, I held Linda's hand tightly. The reasons for the verdict detailed the planned nature of the abuse, the misuse of social status, and above all, the severe psychological and physical harm inflicted on a young grandchild. It's finally over, Linda whispered as we left the courtroom. No, I answered firmly. This is a new beginning. To live as a real family. As we descended the courthouse steps in the twilight, I spoke silently to Tom in my heart. Watch over us. We're about to begin our story as a truly loving family. April had regained her former bright smile. On weekends, she could be seen playing with friends in the B&B's garden. Linda and Brian set up their new home on Market Street, just a few blocks from my B&B. Now we could truly cherish our family time together. Brian took over complete management of Watson Real Estate. He immediately transformed the company's direction, shifting from profit-first policies to emphasizing community contribution. And I continue my morning garden routine as always. A new day was beginning in the early summer breeze, filled with the scent of roses. "Grandma." April's cheerful voice rings through the garden. 1 year has passed since then. Greenwich was welcoming another new season. In my B&B's garden, daisies and roses compete in full bloom. While doing my usual morning maintenance, I hear the excited voices of children. "April, wait up." Looking up, I see April running into the garden with 3 friends. Her vivid blue ribbon sparkled in the morning light. "Grandma, I brought my friends." "Welcome, dears. I just baked some scones. Would you like them with tea?" The children cheered. April now attends the most prestigious prep school in town. Her teacher tells me she's the class favorite. Her wounded heart has surely healed, surrounded by love. Linda and Brian have started their new life in their Market Street home. It's a 7-minute walk from my B&B. We always share family meals on weekends. That's become our greatest joy now. "Mom, that pot roast last Sunday was amazing," Linda says while helping with after-dinner cleanup. She's returned to teaching and is thriving in her work. "That's your father's cherished recipe. He must be smiling in heaven." Brian has been busy creating a new corporate culture at Watson Real Estate. From profit-first to community-focused. His sincere approach has earned high praise from townspeople. "We recently took on the renovation of an old church, converting it for use as a community center," he explains. His eyes have lost their former cloudiness. He's found joy in living by his own convictions, freed from his parents' control. George and Eleanor are serving their sentences at Connecticut State Prison. Their case sent shockwaves through Greenwich's social circles. Former supporters have distanced themselves one by one. With their masks of false benevolence stripped away, no one stands as their ally anymore. But our family has begun walking forward. The B&B has gained new regular guests. Sometimes April plays piano during breakfast. Guests enjoy peaceful mornings listening to her performance. "Grandma, why don't we all go for a picnic this Sunday?" April suggests while helping me tend the garden. "That's a wonderful idea. Let's invite your mom and dad and head to the nearby lake. It's been 4 years since Tom passed away. But now, I'm surrounded by genuine happiness. Peaceful times with my beloved family. Days filled with trust and consideration. The roses in the garden sparkle in the morning light. New buds are about to bloom. The dream Tom and I had when we started this B&B 35 years ago is bearing fruit, though in a different form than we imagined. A place to create happy memories. A place for healing hearts. And above all, a place where loving family gathers. The early summer breeze gently sweeps through the garden. Come on, April. Let's serve those scones to your friends. And so our new story continues, quietly but surely moving forward. This morning, I truly felt this was what happiness means.